Every animal on Earth is constrained by its energy budget. In an article for Smithsonian Magazine, Jerry Adler proposes that for most human beings, calories are burned invisibly through activities like powering the heart, the digestive system, and especially the brain, which silently works to move molecules around within and among its 100 billion cells. A human body at rest devotes roughly 1/5 of its energy to the brain, regardless of whether it's thinking anything useful or really anything at all. In 2009, Harvard University professor of biological anthropology Richard Wrangham proposed the cooking hypothesis, which is the theory that our brains became significantly larger than our ancestors because of cooking. They could spend less time on energy-draining activities like foraging, chewing, and digesting foods because cooking drew out additional nutrients and they had more energy to spend. Larger brains allowed us to process more information, create more dynamic social groups, and adjust to unfamiliar habits. And what made this possible? Legend has it that Prometheus, the son of a Titan, scaled Mount Olympus, the home of the gods, to steal fire from the workshop of the god of fire and metalworking Hephaestus and the goddess of war Athena. Prometheus gave the fire to humans, which gave them the power to harness nature for their own benefit and ultimately dominate the natural order. With fire, humans could care for themselves with food and warmth, and they could also forge weapons and wage war. Prometheus' gift of fire acted as a catalyst for the rapid progression of civilization. When a community gets a new powerful tool, the way we live our lives changes drastically and for the better. Hi everyone, I'm Dan Mall. I run a design collaborative called SuperFriendly that specializes in partnering with in-house teams to make better products with design systems. I want to talk to you today about some of the most common design system pitfalls that we see in our work and how to avoid them. A few months ago, I asked on Twitter, if someone said to you, "Show me your design system," what's the first thing you'd pull up? 50% of respondents replied with, "My pants," thanks Twitter. But after that, here are all the different kinds of things with which people replied. Now, what does this signal? What does this mean? Does this say that despite all of our great articles that we have and books and talks about design systems that we're still unsure what they actually are? I love the definition that Alla Kulmatova suggests in her book, Design Systems, published by Smashing Magazine. She says a design system is a set of connected patterns and shared practices coherently organized to serve the purposes of a digital product. That's perfect. Unfortunately, not everyone follows this guidance. When many people think about design systems, they picture something like this, right? Something in Figma or Sketch that displays all of the individual pieces. Now, this is a UI kit. UI kits are really useful, but they're only a piece of a design system, not the entire thing. If we go back to Alla's definition, a UI kit is really only this part. It's the connected patterns. So let's talk about some of the other pieces. Now, we already mentioned UI kit. We established that. The other obvious part is the connected patterns that Alla talked about is a library of all the components, which is the code counterpart to what normally would be found in a UI kit. Now, every good design system has guidelines. I think we all know that. And that's really the shared practices part. And then rather than those guidelines just kind of floating around, we typically collect them and all the components from the library into a reference site. Some call it a style guide site. Now that's the coherently organized part. And then all of the stuff comes together to help you make a thing, to help you make a product. And that covers the to serve the purposes of a digital product part. So now that we have all of our pieces, this is really what our design system is made of, or what a design system is made of, and how each piece relates to the others. Now, in our product on the right side, the digital part is important because that's what specifies that our design system needs to be a piece of software in order to create a digital product. And then, of course, the more digital products you have, like websites and apps, the more helpful your design system actually becomes. This is where you see the fruition of it. And then one last piece to take it to the next level. This isn't part of the definition or the table stakes for a design system, but if you keep your eye on the top right of the box on the left side, a lot of teams are now experimenting and playing around with design tokens. And you can do a lot of things with design tokens, like you can document them in your reference site, as well as import them directly into a component library to make your design system even more modular and reusable. So here are all of the things that are involved in a design system. Now, I probably didn't tell you anything that you really don't know here, even if the visualization itself is new to you. And yet so many teams still struggle with design systems. Now, why is that? Aren't the pieces here pretty straightforward? At SuperFriendly, we have a new service that we've been testing with a few clients over the last couple of months. We call it our Design System Diagnostic. And just like you see in the screenshot, what we do is we audit existing design systems against 8 different categories. And those categories are organizational involvement, assets and tooling, team workflow, design language, code architecture, product implementation, campaigning, and maintenance and governance. Whew. Now, I know it's a bit to process all at once, but just take a second to guess to yourself which one of these is the one that we see teams struggle with the most. All right, so we catalog all the results as well as all the questions we get in our workshops and projects, and we sort them into these categories. So let me reorder these to show you where we get the most amount of questions. And this is how it all shakes out. What can we tell by this view? Well, first thing, let's look at the very bottom of this graph. Only 1% of the questions in the comments we get are about assets and tooling. In general, we find that designers and developers know how to design and develop. Who would have thought? Very rarely do we actually see teams that are confused about the what a design system is, what it's good for. Instead, all of the stuff that they're left scratching their heads about is really the how stuff. How to work together better, how to integrate a design system seamlessly into products, that kind of stuff. So for the rest of this talk, I'm going to focus on these 3 specific pitfalls that I see design systems are often subject to. How to use a design system effectively, how to use a design system properly with a whole team, and then how to get other teams to use it. So let's start with that last one, shall we? How do you get other people to use your design system? And actually, how do you even get anyone to want your design system? There's no shortage of search results when you Google how to get buy-in for a design system. Most of the top results share similar sage advice, and I've done many of the same things before in myself. Essentially, you collect your case, you prepare your return on investment talking points, you march into your leadership's office, and you exclaim, "Let me tell you why this company needs a design system." Sometimes this works. Most times it doesn't. Let me tell you about a better way. During the Korean War, there was a significant number of defectors from a particular US training camp. And so Dr. Frank Wesley, a professor of psychology at Portland State University, set out to discover what made this camp so unique. And he learned that this camp taught soldiers that the North Koreans were cruel, heartless barbarians who despised the United States and sought its destruction. When they were captured, however, they found something a little bit different. They were shown unexpected kindness from their captors. And now this small thing was enough to change their minds about who the North Koreans were. Rather than walking into your design director or VP of products office with your ROI facts, instead try walking in with unexpected kindness. Most of the times it looks like these kinds of words coming out of your mouth. See, your leadership has their own battle to fight. Now, certainly not nearly as significant as a literal international war, but they are trying to conquer the expectations of the roadmap from their stakeholders. Now, these are the kinds of things that your leadership is focusing on. Rebranding, replatforming, content and data migration, mergers and acquisitions. These are the best kinds of opportunities for a design system effort because the organization has already committed to a large company-wide change. Hitch your buy-in quest to that wagon because it's already on the move. Volunteer your team to tackle this stuff, and you don't even have to say the words design system. In fact, we encourage our clients to not say those words to leadership because it's really just a distraction. If you want some suggestions on what to say instead of design system, you can replace it with phrases like 3 months ahead of schedule, less bugs, and higher velocity. These are kind gifts to give to your product leader. And it really will be unexpected because people typically talk to their managers only when they want something, not necessarily when they have something to give. People like us know that the way that we'll accomplish these things on this list are through design systems, but that's really inside baseball. All right, let's say you've got your buy-in from leadership to help out with the replatforming or the rebrand. Well, what comes next? And this is probably the biggest pitfall that I see teams walk into blindly. What do teams normally do here? They start making components. No, that is a terrible idea. Why is this so bad? Because you just promised your head of product that you would help them with the roadmap. So help them with the roadmap. How would you normally do that? You would go and check out your backlog and maybe you'd pick off whatever's ready and you'd start working on that. And that is still a great thing to do here. Don't worry too much about doing anything too design system-y. Do the regular old product design stuff. The best way to grow your design system is to continue to focus on creating customer value. Most good organizations structure their backlog to maximize and accelerate customer value. So picking off roadmap items is you helping improve your product and your organization, which helps your design system too. One of the basic reasons that teams don't do this in general is that it's kind of difficult to know what to do sometimes. If you're feeling that, you're definitely not alone. We have a podcast about design systems called Get It Out of Your System. And we talk to design system leaders about what's the most difficult thing for them in wrangling their design system. So here's what a few of them had to say about this particular topic. We talked to Joanna Kirtley over at Liberty Mutual. Joanna, what's the most difficult thing for you and your team lately?
The most difficult thing right now is that we have so much to do and not enough time or resources.
And so how do you stay organized and make sure that you're continually delivering customer value?
We have a backlog. It's a very extensive backlog. And we basically just have some really ambitious goals for Q1 of all the components we want to either add to the system or revise in the system. And we're working through that list as fast as we can.
Now, Kim Williams over at Minted had a pretty similar sentiment. Kim, what's tough for you lately regarding design systems?
The toughest part is being new and also shifting gears from having a lot of resources and a lot of team members to having a small and mighty team and trying to figure out how I'm going to balance everything to get this work done.
Thanks, Kim. The story seems pretty similar for Lindsay Berry over at Lyft. Lindsay, do you at all find it difficult to stay aligned with your roadmap?
We work so closely with our users, the designers and engineers at Lyft, that we end up in a place where we're getting feedback quite often, right? And that feedback can come from various places. But when we respond to that feedback, however long or short we end up responding, it can feel very reactionary versus the intentionality that we may have when we start planning a roadmap and we have all these ideas around like exactly what we want to finish in a quarter or a half, and all this input and feedback from the people sitting right next to us are seemingly like throwing us off that original roadmap or intention-based designing or building.
And there you have it. 3 quick examples of how difficult it is for even really experienced design system leaders and teams to balance the needs of the design system itself and the products that it serves. And so how do you choose? Well, a few years ago, we helped create a design system for a small Catholic liberal arts university just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania called Seton Hill University. And the way that we did that design system work was by doing the regular old product work. And what you see here in front of you is the health sciences page, which was an example of our area of study template. Now, if we scroll down this page, you'll see here in purple an area that says, from degrees to careers. And the idea was that for every area of study, we could show the kinds of jobs students who have this degree typically get after graduating. We designed it, we built it, we called it from degrees to careers component. We figured it'd be kind of a one-off component, a snowflake as we sometimes call it, not terribly reusable, pretty straightforward, right? And then we started making a few more pages. This one here is the campus life template. And we figured that it would be nice to include a calendar of events on this page. As we quickly talked about it, the team realized we could use a pretty similar format that we use on the From Degrees to Careers section. So we mocked that up. All right, looks good. From an implementation standpoint, though, it felt a little bit odd to use the From Degrees to Careers components for upcoming events. So we had a couple of choices here. The first thing we could do is we could duplicate the From Degrees to Careers component and make a similar component called Upcoming Events. That didn't seem very efficient. The second thing we could do is we could abstract the From Degrees to Careers component so that it serves both use cases. And so we chose the second path. What we did was we abstracted it into a component called the vertical tabs component. And then the vertical tabs component can accept anything in the main body area, and the tabs themselves can accept a modifier of rainbow with colors to be passed in. Now, when I show this simple example to teams, there's usually 2 pieces of feedback that I get. The first piece of feedback is this: didn't you just do it backwards? Couldn't you have started by saying, well, let's make a vertical tabs component and then use it on each of the pages? And the answer is yes, we could have done that, but we didn't really know that we needed it until we got to the page. It is significantly easier to fill your design system with components that you actually need and will use once you have real content and real use cases. For almost every organization we work with, they have what I call a design system graveyard, which is full of attempts at design systems that no one's ever used because they're full of components that weren't really needed, and also they don't have components in there that everyone wanted. And so here's how normies make design systems. The first thing they do is they guess what abstract components are needed. And then the second thing is they sort of cross their fingers and send up some thoughts and prayers and wish for some good luck. And now here is how good-looking geniuses like all of you make design systems. First, you make great products that customers love. And then you extract components from them to place them in the design system. Right? You have to assess which products best feed the design system. I call these pilots. And if there's only one thing I could teach about design systems, it would be pilots. In my opinion, using pilots are the easiest, fastest, and most successful way to create a design system. So here's how that process actually works. Let's say we were making a design system for Nike. We would look at our roadmap for, say, the next year or two, and we would chart out all of the products that we have to make. Next, we need a set of criteria that will evaluate all of the products through. Now, we have 8 specific criteria that we tend to use: potential for common components, potential for common patterns, high value elements, technical feasibility, available champions, scope, technical independence, and marketing potential. I won't go through the criteria in detail right now. You can read about them specifically in this link on the SuperFriendly site, but the most important thing is that you just have criteria. And once you have criteria, you can take it, and then you can lay it into our chart of digital products. And then you can score those products. Now, there are 2 specific things that are really nice about doing it this way. The first thing is that it makes figuring out the sequence of how you should tackle your roadmap, it makes that super easy. Just follow the scores. Do the highest score first, and then the lowest score last. If you scored accurately and you do the highest scoring pilot first, the second one you do should benefit from the work that you've done in the first one. And then the third one should benefit from the second one, and so on and so forth. The pilot should get easier as you go along because you should be extracting components and patterns from each pilot as you do it. And then you grow the design system constantly that way. Now, one quick note that I want to make is that a pilot doesn't have to be a full app or site. We recently did some design system work with a major airline, and many of our pilots, sorry, pun unintended there, were portions of pages like a flight search results table or the arrival or departure flight block because of how complex those were. In the Seton Hill example I showed earlier, each of the pages could be considered a pilot because we could harvest and extract many things from each of them back into the design system after we created them. The second nice thing about this is that roadmap sequencing is usually really subjective. Sometimes a powerful or loud product owner picks their pet projects or their pet teams to get funding and priority. A scorecard like this turns all of that subjectivity into something more objective that can be debated and discussed against agreed upon criteria. Now, what I hope you take away from this is that making good roadmap decisions should mean that you're making good design system decisions and vice versa. As much as possible, make this a BOGO. Buy one, get one free. I mentioned that I'd get 2 big pieces of feedback when I show a screen like this, and so here's the second piece. It's often framed as a criticism. You just kind of took some cool looking things and made them more boring. Yes, that's kind of the point of design systems. In fact, my friend Josh Clark wrote a great article called "The Most Exciting Design Systems Are Boring." There are so many great nuggets in this article. Allow me to point out a few. Josh says, design systems are containers for institutional knowledge. Identify the design problems teams confront over and over again. The more common the problem, the better. Design systems should prioritize the mundane. Now, Josh isn't the only one who stumbled upon this idea. In his book, Do Scale, about scaling organizations, Les McKeown remarks, scalability is built on mastering the mundane. Design systems are an exercise in scaling across an organization, so all of this thought applies very well to what we're talking about. This is my friend Brian Powell. He's an incredible art director and designer, and he is known for occasionally riling up design Twitter. Here's an example of something he shared a few months ago. He said, "Okay, I see now. Design systems are really just UI kits and libraries of icons. It's all making sense why designers are effing awful at design. They aren't designing, they are rearranging components someone else designed. Great job, scrapbookers." I mean, he's not wrong. Brian designs beautiful interfaces like this visually interesting composition for Chrome Industries, or this typographic and grid-driven portfolio for Studio, or this rich microsite to drum up interest for an upcoming TV show a few years ago. How do you reconcile this kind of work and this kind of designer with the idea that design systems should prioritize the mundane and the boring stuff? Well, luckily, Josh has an answer for us there too. It's not that we're removing all of the invention altogether. We're just reallocating it. Josh says when the design system is boring, it frees designers and developers to do the new stuff, to solve new problems. Invention happens in the products. If you're a designer like Brian who wants to invent and create new interactions and paradigms, that's awesome. Work on the products themselves. And then it's someone else's job to take what's initially a unique, hard-won, one-off solution and systematize it for others to use. Now, this isn't a new idea. Think about any site you built a few years ago. You painstakingly wrote custom code for that functionality, and it was a work of art. Today, there's probably a jQuery plugin for it, and it's 1 or 2 lines to instantiate. I remember making a short film in design school. It was 90 seconds long, and it took me 10 weeks to create and finish. And just yesterday, my daughter made a better film on iMovie on a hand-me-down iPhone 5S in about 20 to 30 minutes. Systematizing and democratizing great design solutions is the stuff that ensures that designers have to keep upping the ante on what they can invent and helps other people to become better designers. Now imagine some of you are thinking, wouldn't all designers want to work on the product stuff instead of the system stuff then? Wouldn't they want to be doing the invention work and not the systematizing work? Well, in order to answer that, let's talk about beavers. Beavers are fascinating, aren't they? They build dams mostly for protection and also to make sure they have food when it gets colder. But even though it's not their intention, so many other species benefit from what they build. Woodpeckers occupy the trees beavers excavate. Ducks and geese settle in their old lodges. Their wetlands become homes for herons, kingfishers, frogs, lizards, dragonflies, mussels, beetles, and more. Dr. Clive Jones at the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies came up with a name for creatures like beavers who create habitats for others to flourish. He calls them ecosystem engineers. Isn't that a great name for the people who either intentionally or unintentionally create the habitat for others to flourish? I know many a designer that would and have traded invention for habitat building. I interviewed at Facebook years ago, and I remember asking a very talented designer there what was interesting to him about working there. He said, having the ability to roll out a feature to 10 or 100 million users, that is like crack. Ecosystem engineers are interested in building platforms, quite literally, raised surfaces on which people or things can stand. 30 years ago, Sir Tim Berners-Lee used the existing technology of HTTP and a newly transformed version of SGML called HTML and stacked them together as a platform to create the World Wide Web. And then 15 years ago, it only took 6 months for the founders of YouTube to build it because it stood on the raised platform of the web. And now, YouTubers are building brands and making lots of money in months because they're leveraging the raised platform of YouTube. If you're the kind of person that likes building platforms to help others succeed, a design system team might be the right kind of team for you. Okay, over to the last pitfall. For the last decade or so, the divide between designers and engineers has been growing. As much as I don't like that, I get why that is. Each has their own set of tools, experiences, and even their own culture. One of the reasons I'm so excited about design systems is that it's an equally powerful tool and a useful tool for both designers and engineers. Prometheus' gift of fire to humans changed the course of humanity forever because humans did things with it. They cooked food. They migrated. When you get a powerful new tool, you have to change something in your behavior in order to make the most of it. Now, the biggest pitfall I see with design systems is that designers and engineers still try to work the way that they've been working without a design system, even though they may have one now. For example, I'll say to a designer-engineer pair, why don't you go work on the homepage together? And this is what they do. The designer goes back to their desk to make a comp of the homepage, and the engineer waits for the designer to make a comp of the homepage so that they can build it. And they truly believe that this is working together. It is not. I'm going to show you 2 short videos that hopefully illuminate how different working together could actually be. For this one, it might be a little bit unclear what's happening, but see what you can understand. I know some of you may have seen this before. There's no audio on this clip, but just see what you can make out. Now, for those that don't know what this is an experiment that Airbnb ran a few years ago. What they did was they put paper sketches in front of a camera, and through machine learning, the AI tied a sketch to a component in the design system and assembled a layout automatically. Now, let's watch this one more time. Now here's a similar experiment by Jordan Singer, a designer in New York. Again, no audio. So let's freeze it here. It says, an app that has a navigation bar with a camera icon, photos title, and a message icon. A feed of photos with each photo having a user icon, a photo, a heart icon, and a chat bubble icon. I don't know the specific mechanics of how that works, but I assume it's similar to the last video in that this one probably uses some natural language processing to tie recognized words and phrases to components in a design system. Now, what is absolutely bananas about this is that we as an industry are more willing and able to write a software program that uses natural language processing or machine learning to assemble an interface than we are to sit down with a design or engineering counterpart and use these same exact words. Both of these examples assume there's already a design system in place, or at least a library in place, and this is how you use a design system when you have it. My friend and frequent collaborator Brad Frost and I coach teams both in public and private workshops about how to work together more effectively, especially when you either have a design system or intend to create one. We teach a method we call the hot potato process, which designer and developer work on the same product in as small of a chunk as possible and pass it back and forth as often as possible, like a game of hot potato. We released this video of the workflow. If you're interested in seeing the details, it's about 2 hours long and it goes over a lot of the nuances, but the big idea is how quickly you can create something of high quality in a very short amount of time if you know how to collaborate well. We help teams shorten their product sprint cycle from weeks to hours, I kid you not, by eliminating a lot of the waste that comes with the waterfall or not knowing how to do Agile for real. Now, I just showed you 2 AI versions where the designer tells the computer to make something. What's even better about doing this with another person is that instead of an AI, the other person could say, "Oh, I have a different idea," or "I have a better idea." And that conversation is the start of where excellent work comes from, because everyone is invested and their ideas are represented early on. Now, I recently discovered an amazing store near my house. It's called Andy's Brick Shop, and it's a store full of Legos, and it is a perfect analogy for what an ideal experience of interacting with a design system should be like. The first thing you see when you walk in is a showcase of all of the coolest and most expensive things people have made. This photo shows a Star Wars Y-Wing fully assembled and on sale for $360. Now, here's an assembled $368 Star Wars Snowspeeder. Here's some more Star Wars transport vehicles. Here's a $100 Space Shuttle Orbiter. An $80 assembled Millennium Falcon. And then as you get past the higher end assembled pieces, you start to see some lower value assembled pieces like these $8 houses and storefronts. Still pretty cool. Then towards the middle of the store, lining the walls on each side, are different universes that show assembled sets. So here's Star Wars. Here's the Middle-earth universe from the Tolkien, Hobbit, and Lord of the Rings stuff. Here's DC and Marvel. And then once you get past the universes, you start to see collections by type instead of theme. So for example, here are the Batmans and the Supermans. And you see the Chewbacca's and the C-3POs. Now, it gets even more granular the farther back you go. You can find a bin of just heads. Lots of heads. Lots and lots of heads. And other things. Spiderwebs, sprockets, connectors, flames, pots, wheels, all organized into their own categories. Now, farther back still, you find things not organized into their own categories. This is just a pile of stuff, all the uncategorized stuff. Some will be organized eventually, and some of it won't. Now, there's even one more layer to this. Are you ready for it? At the very back of the store, there is a trash bin for fake Legos. Yep, they exist. They're out there. Andy's Brick Shop acknowledges it and makes room for it while still letting you know that they're not part of the system. And here's the full view from the front of the store. They even hold classes and meetups occasionally where enthusiasts can convene, learn from each other, and really just play together. What an amazing place. Now, if we go back to Allah's definition of design systems, except for the digital product part, Andy's Brick Shop is actually a really fitting model for how people should interact with a design system. We do it backwards, don't we? All the popular reference sites out there lead with the bitty stuff. Principles, components, it's all the stuff that the design system team works on. That's important for sure, but that's like starting at the back of the store. How do the product teams get represented and see themselves as part of the design system? The work that they're doing is nowhere to be found on these reference sites. So, of course, they're going to be skeptical of using it because there's no signal that the design system is for them. Sure, our reference site is a documentation site, but only partially. We can't forget that it's a marketing site too. Material design. Lead with Gmail and Maps and search as powerful examples of what you can do with material. Atlassian. Show us Bitbucket and Trello and Jira and prove how you can do efficient, consistent design at scale. Once we start to put the Millennium Falcon at the front of the store, I bet a lot more people will walk in. Now, it's easy to get caught up in the technical bits of design systems. After all, there are a lot of them. But my friend Gina Ann, creator of Clarity, the conference about design systems, often comes back to the idea that design systems are for people. The biggest pitfall for design systems are not taking the people into account enough, not helping your VP of product hit their roadmap goals, not helping your product teams by systematizing their work for them, not having conversations and collaborating with one another, not helping your customers by making better products for them. The more we strive to help the people the design system is intended to serve, the more we'll see all of the design system pitfalls ahead of time and know how to avoid them. Thanks very much.